Now, some of the documentaries I probably won't have time to show today that I would draw your attention to is In the Year of the Pig, a documentary that came out in 1969. The Year of the Pig refers to the Chinese zodiac, and this was actually filmed in 1969, 68, 69. Very interesting perspective, an underrated, underappreciated DVD, or a documentary. Another one here is Sir, No Sir. This is outstanding because it's almost all of U.S. soldiers' perspective. And basically the argument of this documentary shows that the reason why the United States could not even prosecute the war in Vietnam is that the entire military by 1970 was dysfunctional. That there was no longer any morale, there was no more command and control. And when we know that at least 2,000 officers were killed by their own men, that's usually a sign that something's not going well in Vietnam. And so this show shows quite clearly how massive the unrest was among U.S. military personnel, not just only enlisted, but officers as well. Another one is Winter Soldier. It's based upon a book. You should watch it before you show this to students, but this is basically U.S. soldiers, returning veterans who held their own war crimes trial of their own actions. These are the testimony of U.S. soldiers of what they said and did. One of the soldiers says, we're often accused of being baby killers, and then he pauses and says, unfortunately, there's too much truth in that. And so this is, has a young Senator John Kerry, of his testimony from the U.S. Congress about the atrocities committed in Vietnam. We've been told that My Lai was a terrible atrocity, but was an aberration or exception. This documentary shows no, what happened in Vietnam when you find an insurgency war, that it's much messier than that. Some of the movies that I show, of course, are the Oliver Stone movies. Platoon, I use for my U.S. History Survey. And if we get a chance, I'll show the last-minute clip on here, that scene that very people have ever noticed. And then this is I really like about Born on the 4th of July. If you haven't read Ron Kovik's memoir, a Marine, one who willingly went to Vietnam and came back and actually was one of the founders of U.S. Vets Against the War in Vietnam. This is a very powerful story. If I get time, I'll show clips of this. What I'm going to mostly concentrate on today for the video presentation is this documentary that I regret to inform, because I do use this for my Modern East Asia. I think it will speak for itself. This is a story of an American woman who lost her husband in Vietnam, never really had closure. 30 years later decides she wants to go back, wants to go to Vietnam and visit the place where he died. And along the way discovers she's not the only one who's been affected. Other American women, and then more importantly, encounters Vietnamese women. And I think that this will speak for itself. And then I always pair it with this movie here, Heaven and Earth. And I hate to show clips from Hearts and Minds, but it's probably the most famous documentary on the war in Vietnam. It was an Oscar winner. This is also very profound, and in an ideal situation, I'd like to show both of them in my classes, but I usually only have time for one, so I choose this one. Is this offered a women's perspective about war, one that I believe we don't get enough, okay? Any questions? Now, before we begin the video presentation, I just want to show you this image here that we often don't see. When we talk about protest movements in Vietnam, we have all these images of flowers being put into gun barrels. I think this is in 1965, and this shows quite clearly the very strong support that the U.S. public had for the war in Vietnam. How many of you have ever seen this image? And it's interesting that this one is never, that there is no public memory of this particular image. And I was quite struck by this.
What year is this?
1965.